Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Thursday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday, and a big shout out to everybody also listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. It is Thursday, which means the Farmer Rapid Fire, which is brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. For more than 90 years, Pioneer has developed and tested products to meet your local challenges. With their new Optimum Glide canola, also Optimum Glide, the sponsor of our coverage of Agritechnica that's coming up in November as well. Don't forget about Enlist E3 soybeans, to performing corn products and industry-leading traits and technologies to maximize your yield potential. Pioneer's on-the-ground teams can help you get the right products for your fields. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more. And we got a great roster of farmers here today we're going to talk to, as well as Ashley Knapton from Pioneer Seeds Canada. She's out in the Ottawa Valley. Looking forward to, I think we're going to talk about corn silage today with her. But our farmers that we have lined up are Franck Groeneweg, who is in Montana. We got Patrick Kunz, who is in Alberta. Mark Burnham is in Ontario. Kristjan Hebert is in Saskatchewan. So a great list. And looking forward to hearing how they're all making out of varied crop conditions across that geography. There is no doubt at all. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. The big surprise yesterday, I had one person say that they thought there was a possibility Macaulay was going back to be the ag minister. I'm going to have to do some double checking on that one for sure. But many were surprised, and we're going to talk to our farmers about that here today. What are their thoughts on Minister Bobo being out and Mr. Macaulay being back in? And we'll get their feedback, their thoughts, and their reaction to it. Got an email about, 10 minutes after the announcement was made. And email says, "This has to be a joke, I hope. I was born on April 1st. I don't see how we can put ag any further in the toilet with the feds by going backwards. I didn't mind Mr. Macaulay, but this is just wrong." So there's one piece of feedback. Now, one of the streams of thoughts that I did get from some people in the Ottawa bubble was that this is somehow, there's a perception that Macaulay is a very, very favorable to agricultural stakeholders, and this is some sort of a peace offering for the industry. We'll have to see if that's what the intention was and that's how it plays out. But we want your feedback, and we'll get to the Farmer Rapid Fire and get theirs right after this.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Claas, where versatility meets productivity head on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, fava beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And we start off this week's Farmer Rapid Fire in Cobourg, Ontario. We're talking to Mark Burnham. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Shaun?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Okay, how do those crops look there in Cobourg?
They're looking pretty good these days. We just dipped into wheat harvest there 2 days ago. Had a bit of a malfunction, and now we're sitting on the sidelines again. So,
What was the malfunction?
The clean grain cross auger shaft broke, so I'm waiting on a new part to come in.
Oh, is this going to take some time, or where does it have to come from? The moon? What's going on?
Yeah, it's got to come from Regina and ground freight, so it's going to be a few days.
Oh, shoot. That's too bad. How were those wheat yields looking? Better than you initially thought?
I had some pretty high expectations, but they are meeting my expectations. Let's say that.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. How about the corn and beans?
They're looking pretty good. I had a few cover crop issues planting green with my corn, so I've got some variability there. But aside from that, the crop looks pretty good.
So talk about the cover crop strategy. What are you doing there with the corn?
So after wheat, we drill in some cover crops with some fertilizer, and then usually in the spring we plant green if there's anything left living, which we usually have some volunteer wheat and everything. And this year it was a slow, wet spring, and then all of a sudden it turned dry, and things got rock hard, and I kind of got caught with my pants down. So,
it's funny how not funny, but challenging conditions kind of work against you when you're trying to, execute an agronomic strategy. It's why it's one of the challenges with farming, where you got to have plan A, B, C, D, and E, right? It makes it, and no 2 years are the same, it feels like.
Yeah, it's always a learning opportunity, and we're changing things up slightly this year, but not too much.
Yeah, and soybeans, you said are like decent at this point.
Yeah, so we don't grow soybeans. We grow an edible bean called an Azuki bean.
Yep.
They're looking probably better than average for the ground that we've got them on this year. But the soybeans in the area, they look pretty damn good. So,
well, it sounds like agronomically things are going pretty decent in your area. So, what's keeping you up at night? What's the big challenge?
The big challenge is staying ahead of things this year. We put a new dryer system in last year, and it didn't get hooked up to the gas till December, so we got behind on our corn harvest, and it's just pushed everything. We didn't finish harvesting till April, which then got our spring prep behind, which then got planting behind, side dressing behind, spraying behind, and we're trying to catch up slowly. So,
yeah.
But that's our big challenge this year, is just kind of trying to catch up and get back in front of things. So,
yeah, you especially when it comes to harvest, you try to kind of, you want to be ready when you got to go, and then like you said, you got a cross auger issue, and well, okay, that's that got to deal with that, and you just things pop up all the time, and just kind of rolling with the punches.
That's right.
The other thing that I'm sure is a little bit top of mind is what the heck to do from a crop marketing perspective. Hold, sell. Who the heck knows when you're trying to decipher? We had Ted Seifert from Zaner Ag Hedge on the show earlier this week, and we talked about like there's selling, doing your crop marketing based on what the fundamentals are, what you think they're going to be, what will U.S. corn yield be? Like those are things that we can deal with. But when we're having to predict military strategy in the Ukraine and Russia, that's where like I don't know what to tell people.
Yeah, it's challenging. We've managed to catch a few of the rallies, and I keep saying, oh, when it's going to rally, I'll sell a little bit. But then you're like, well, went up limit today, and then tomorrow, I'll say I'm gonna starts going down. I'll sell a little bit before it drops too much, and then he's like, oh, it's dropping too fast, and you don't sell. So it's I think you just gotta make a plan and stick to it. And I'm not great at that so far this year, so. And we have got a couple breaks.
It's a yo-yo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the when you've got like the fun side of it too, it gets pushed and, way up and way down, and you're just trying to market some inventory. Right? Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Have you been able to get away at all this summer?
I went up to see my in-laws a couple weeks ago. That's about it. It's been pretty hectic. So
yeah,
I'm hoping once wheat harvest is off, I can get away for a few days. A neighbor here wants to go to the Farm Progress show, and it's got me interested, but I don't know if I can take that much time off. So we'll see.
Yeah. Have you been to Farm Progress before?
No, never. It's always something I've kind of been wanting to see, but timing wise, it's always been a bit of a challenge. So
yeah, I've actually never been to it too. A lot of our team has. Kara's been to it, Burn's been to it, Kelvin's been to it. I've actually never been to it. So
no, you better talk to the boss.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it will be new for all of us here this year. Hey, Mark, this week's question has to do with the big cabinet shuffle that happened this week in Ottawa. We have the former Ag Minister, Marie Clobebeau, is out and moved over to Minister of National Revenue. And Lawrence Macaulay, who was Ag Minister from 2015 to 19, is back in the seat of the Ministry of Agriculture. What are your thoughts on that?
I hadn't really been paying much attention to it. It's probably a good thing that Bebeau is out, just because it seemed like she had a lot on her plate, and it's hard to think that she had enough time to spend on that portfolio. But I guess time will tell if it was a good move or not. Yeah,
I guess a question that I've been chatting with a lot of farmers about is like, what do we want ideally, just take the person out of it for a second. What do we want from an ag minister nowadays? Like if we were putting together the criteria, the characteristics of, okay, what does the industry want out of the ag minister? What suggestions would you have?
I would want someone who has a very good understanding of the basics of how agriculture works and the different types of agriculture that we have in our vast country. And I also want someone to be a big cheerleader and someone who pushes for the farmer and the other industry. Aside from that, I try and stay out of politics. But
it's safer that way. It's actually easier on your stress level too, if you have that strategy. Hey, Mark, thanks so much for joining us here today on the Farmer Rapid Fire. All the best to you, and hopefully this crop comes off like you are expecting, which is it very much sounds like a good one. So thanks so much, and all the best to you.
All right, thanks, Shaun. Talk to you later.
We've got more of the Farmer Rapid Fire coming up. You're listening to Real Ag Radio, brought to you today by Pioneer Seeds Canada.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And we continue the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. We're in Fairlight, Saskatchewan. We're talking to Kristjan Hebert. Hey, Kristjan, how's it going?
Really good. How about you, Shaun?
Hey, pretty good. Hey, how do those crops look?
You know, we've only had about 30 to 40% of normal moisture, but we had lots when we got going seeding. So I'm not going to complain because I know there's a lot worse off than us, but they're pretty dry. We hope for an average yield, but it'll probably come in a little less.
Yeah. Because of the dryness in the back end of the growing season, did you back off on the fungicide application, or did you go forward with it?
Well, we did all of our cereals, and we only did about 5% of our canola. So that'll be the first time in probably a decade that we haven't done all of our canola.
And that shows you that there's proof in the pudding as far as the dryness that, willing to back off on the canola from a sclerotia standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, we got weather stations with soil probes in, and at that fungicide timing, I mean, the top 10 centimeters of soil was dry. There was no moisture left in it. So walking around that fusarium timing, we couldn't find mushrooms anywhere, which, it's difficult for us because we normally do it, but it was just the right decision this year.
Yeah. You mentioned like some people in a lot worse situation. I haven't been to the northern half of the province, but driving around the south, boy, there's some bad spots. There's a lot of okay, and you're not really sure. We won't know until we get in the combine. And then there's some like, not so good. And then there's like some grass, where the grasshoppers and the drought have just ravaged. It's just, some people are in really tough shape.
Yeah, I think around Moose Jaw and parts of Regina there look pretty good. And the minute you get west of that, the west side of Saskatchewan and southern Alberta is in pretty tough shape in a general terms. I mean, there's probably pockets that are good, but yeah. You feel for those farmers. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that other than keep trying to fight and hope that there's something left.
Now, Saskatchewan changed crop insurance this year. Is that going to work out well given the year that we have right now, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say that I did a whole bunch of in-depth analysis. I mean, I think some individual coverages are going to be up. The one thing I think that might have happened, though, is in a lot of cases, premiums were up, significantly to the point that they capped a lot of guys at a $5 increase. So there may have been a lot of farms drop from, say, 80% coverage down to 70% because of the premium, even though they had more coverage. So at the end of the day, probably have something pretty equal in terms.
Yeah. I know you follow the market super close. What are your thoughts on what's going on right now, and how has that impacted your marketing strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty bullish, canola especially, but wheat too. And I just can't tell you if I'm bullish because of the drought, because of what's going on, in the world of financial markets, or because of a war. And that makes it a little bit scary in that supply and demand tells us that there's probably upside in canola and wheat, but at the same time, there's so much volatility. It's tough to be real confident in anything. So, you know, we're just trying to look for really good points of basis right now because there's some opportunities out there. And we do have a belief that yields are going to come in closer to a couple years ago or even lower. So, you know, our feeling is that we're going to wait on futures on a lot of the crop.
Yeah, you know, canola has really, even when the rest of the commodities were sliding, canola was kind of the contrarian play. And, you know, and it's, I look at, you know, bar chart every, you know, multiple times per day, and it just, canola always seems to be green. And it may be just like, you know, $2, $3, $4, $5, but you string 2 weeks of that together and you've made a pretty significant move. It's really kind of amazing.
Well, I mean, a couple things. I mean, Costal's report a couple weeks ago was pretty interesting on, you know, what if a 17 million ton crop, and that makes us run out of canola even at current crush capacity. Not run out, but, you know, everyone's got to clean out the bins by next July. So we know that the top of canola is in that $25 a bushel. It showed us that in the last 24 months, and the downside is wherever we think it can go. But I think everyone was a little worried that we might see some $15, $16 canola if you'd have talked, you know, a couple months ago that's what we had to be ready for. And now, you know, 1950s in the cards. And I would say that band of 18 to 22, maybe even 24 is getting closer and closer to reality. We don't always like the reason it's getting there because obviously our yields are going down, but you know, the increase in price does help for at least those with the okay crops. There's still a lot of opportunity there. You know, the guys that don't have anything, you feel for them missing this one.
Oh, again, that's the thing. It's not just this time, it's again. And
I've got a 93-year-old landlord that put in 65 crops, and he gave me one of the best pieces of advice. I keep it pretty close to heart. He said, I only needed 7 of them to create my net worth, and the rest of them I was just there to make sure I was there for the 7. So that's where you really feel for this group that maybe 1, 2, 3 times has missed some of those crops of a lifetime, right? Not too many times you get 3 shots at the plate at prices like this, and so you really feel for those guys. If you kind of use my landlord's advice, if you're only going to get 7 and you miss 3 because of severe drought, that's tough.
You know, that is fantastic words of wisdom. Does he have any other ones that he wants to share with the rest of us?
Yeah, I know what. He's a great guy. He's 93. He still comes to see me every second Wednesday. I've rented his land for a long time, and you know, he was 3,000 acres back in like the early 80s, and had it cleaned up really good, and ran 2 air seeders early 2000s or even the late 90s because he always felt that he couldn't get done his cereals when he should be seeding his canola, and that it needed 2 different kinds of boots. And I always tell him he forgets more about farming than I probably know. So he's still one of my favorite people to have coffee with at 93 years old.
You know, there's lots to be said about that. I enjoy those kinds of conversations too, because, you know, a lot has changed in farming. You know, you think about the technology side, just in the pace of the way the markets move. So like stuff has changed, but there's still fundamental principles in place. And that experience is just, that knowledge is just wealth. Like it just those principles carry forward. And I just encourage everybody to take the time to have those kinds of conversations. Good on you to take the time to do that.
Well, I think probably a pretty good opening here. I mean, you might have heard this already, but I mean, agriculture lost a living legend this week. Danny Kleinfelter passed away. And I mean, he was another one of my mentors that his advice was just timeless. And I mean, there weren't many people on earth that I enjoyed visiting with more than him. And that every single time I talked to him, he left with a nugget of advice that, that made me sleep better at night. So hopefully we can continue to find guys, you know, like John, that's my 93-year-old landlord, and Danny, that as they aged, they stayed super excited about the industry and kind of transitioned into their career on into that mentorship stage, but an optimistic mentor, and always tried to see the best in everything instead of, I think sometimes in our industry we can get negative. So I know personally I'll miss Danny pretty hard, and I think a lot of people in North America will.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's, you know, there's a lot of our audience on both sides of the border that, you know, when they talk about farm management and farm business, Danny's name came up all the time. And it was, I think it was Ron Cron, that's who it was, from Manitoba, that tweeted earlier Wednesday that they're, you know, going through Danny's program, maybe been the greatest thing in terms of impact on his farm business ever. So I think there's a lot of people that agree with your sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, Denny's TPAP was where it started, and I mean, he sat on our board of advisors for years, and it even caught me off guard. I talked to him quite a bit in the last 6 months, so I mean, it was a surprise. But I mean, kind of mentioned to his family this week, I don't know anybody that'll leave more of a legacy in agriculture, and a legacy that's not just memories, but still impacts a lot of change as people read his articles and remember what he was for. So, yeah, it's a tough one, but at the same time, a lot of people are going to remember him in a lot of good ways.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Kristjan. Hey, this week we're asking everybody the question about the big cabinet shuffle that happened in Ottawa on Wednesday, and we have Minister Bibeau is out as Ag Minister, and Lawrence McCauley, who was Ag Minister for a period of time from 15 to 19, is back. What are your thoughts on the big change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a change that maybe surprised everybody. I think they thought he was going to stay pretty status quo, and I mean, I'll kind of say the same thing as I have in the past, is that I'd sure like to see a little bit more Western influence on agriculture in particular. I think we have a lot of Eastern influence on government as a general theme right now. And yeah, I think the farmers in the West would like to feel a little bit more heard. So change is always good. You get new ears, et cetera. But at the same time, some Western influence on agriculture, especially with the themes of, sustainability and carbon tax, seems to be coming out of Ottawa pretty consistently right now. I think Western Canadian farmers in a large percentage of our acres would like to feel a little more heard. So we'll see if Minister McCauley can accomplish that. But at the same time, I sure wish he lived in, Regina or Calgary or somewhere like that.
Hey, Kristjan, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. All the best to you during harvest. We'll check in with you a little bit later on in the year, okay?
Sounds great, Sean.
When we come back on Real Ag Radio, we'll continue the Farmer Rapid Fire. We're going to stop in Alberta and then Montana and then back out to the Ottawa Valley. You're listening to Real Ag Radio, brought to you today by Pioneer Seeds Canada.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
And we take the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada, to Beiseker, Alberta. We're talking to Patrick Kunz. Hey, Patrick, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Okay, how do the crops look there in Beiseker?
I just took silage off at about just over half, and I'm probably more happy about that than I should be, considering how things look elsewhere. But I'm just happy to get some feed off, and I think better to have feed than not. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Now, is this dryland silage?
Yeah, it's dryland.
Okay, what was it?
It was barley. It was actually semi-dwarf variety, Esma.
Okay.
So it's not really meant for silage, but obviously I need to take down more than I anticipated. I do have a cover crop too that's kind of going to come off in a week or so. I've always wanted to try a shorter variety because most of the nutritional value is in the head anyways, and the yield too, actually. So we'll see how that shakes out with the tests, the feed tests and whatnot, and see how that goes.
Yeah, interesting. Now, I know on irrigation there are people that do semi-dwarfs for silage because they want the standability, right? Now, you're in a dryland situation. Did it actually get some height to it, considering how dry it's been?
No, not really. Everything's really short. But, I mean, that's not really... The heads on it were actually decent. I wouldn't say they're... Yeah, like So it's hard to say. I don't know. I got to get the feed test back, see how that yields, because I can always, if it's really high quality, which I'm thinking it will be, it should be lower ADF or lower fiber than than a really tall variety. And if I need to mix it off with straw, then that's not a problem anyway. So
yeah, I guess overall, you did mention how things look around you. What's the moisture situation been around Beiseker?
If I say poor, there's going to be people that are going to be like, "Oh, but mine's so much worse." And I realize that it just, I would say that we're about half of normal, something like that. So, I mean, it's not disastrous like some areas for sure. We are going to have crops. We're going to run the combine. So I drove to Saskatoon for Ag in Motion, and drove past a bunch of stuff that was not very much fun to look at. So. Yeah,
I had somebody text me this week that was around the Jenner area that said, I think even the sage is dying. It's so dry. Like, I made that same drive. There's some bad spots.
Yeah, I know a few guys out east, and it's not even the worst where I drove through. There's stuff that hasn't even germinated, like from seeding.
Yeah. Okay, how about the beef side of the equation? How are the cows doing?
Good. I would say we started supplementing feed a few weeks ago because I ran out of pasture. We're always fairly tight, so I can't complain too much. But this is the first time that we've ever supplemented, and I wouldn't even say it's supplementing anymore. We're just full flex feeding right now.
Okay. What kind of grazing method do you use?
I would say it's like a limited rotational grazing. We don't put them out until like June, beginning of June, basically, because I am limited. Our pasture here is basically all just land that can't be used for anything else. So get a little bit of cows on it, and you can usually make more than anything. But kind of take some profit off of poor land. That's the way that I guess my strategy is. And I do have maybe 4 or 5 pastures that I rotate through over summer, so a few weeks in each kind of thing.
Yeah, to give people an idea of kind of what the grass situation's like what would the stocking rate be on a quarter?
I don't need, because it's like my pasture's all like very oddly shaped, cut up stuff, and I just use it. It's much higher than it should be here for me.
Okay. You got a lot of triangles and pentagons and octagons.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like it's not even. And I put them out there, and I pay attention to what the pasture looks like, and if I need to move them, I move them and whatnot. And it depends on the year and the previous rotation and things like that. Stocking rates here are probably double what they are. I'm pretty high because they're not out there very long. As soon as silage comes off, I put them out on silage stubble, and they can eat kind of, like all the headlands and stuff like that. And there's usually some leftover stuff that's, just laying there for them to eat. So they can clean that up. And then after that, it's pea stubble and harvest, and they're just out on land. So in all reality, they're out there June and July, and then, usually a few weeks in August kind of thing. But that's probably less time than what most people graze to, or graze pasture to. But,
no, I can't remember. Do you feed them out, or what do you do?
Yeah, we finish them.
Yeah. Boy, it could be a steamy feeder market this fall.
Oh, it not could be. It will be.
Yeah.
And as to what that, I mean, it was. I got to get asked the question every year because we do quite a bit of custom feeding for cow calf guys and whatnot. And I got to ask the question all the time about markets, and I don't know. Like, the fall is probably a poor predictor of what is going to happen in spring, and that's we'll see, right? If you want to feed cattle, I would say probably the best strategy is just to do it kind of at least for 10 years, because there will be years in there where it's great and years where it's not, and you got to average that out. And I would never say that you should do it with any kind of money that you're that you like don't go to the bank or anything and do it. If you have some cash, and certainly with grain farming the way it's been going for the last few years, it's, prices have been high. I think there has been, from a mixed farm perspective, there has been some cash available. And if you want to, you can defer taxes if that's an issue, obviously, or you can.
You forgot one part. I like your idea as far as the 10 years. Also, buckle your seatbelt.
Oh, buckle your seatbelt, because it will. Like, it's not. You think like farming in general, people talk about rain and whatnot being risky, but holy man, like there is. And buckle your seatbelt is right.
Well, what would you like to see the new Ag Minister, Lawrence McCauley, or I guess what's old is new again, Ag Minister, what would you like to see them focus on? Making it rain, maybe?
Holy man, yeah. I guess that. I think there's a bit of a disconnect between what's happening in the livestock sector versus the farm sector. The way that you can kind of insure, and you know what I'm talking about. Just like my crop side is fairly easily and well insured. The risk is not nearly what it is with cattle. With my biggest relief in farming is when my silage pit is full. That is it. If after that it hails, I'm covered. I'm not. Maybe it's not going to be a profitable year, but at least I can continue doing what I'm doing. If I don't get the pit filled, I can go buy. But usually, when you're in that kind of a situation, there's just not much feed around, and I certainly wouldn't want to go buy, elsewhere right now, just because you'd have to drive a long ways and it's so expensive. But there is that disconnect. I do think we had a couple of weeks ago, I had some people out from Ottawa. One was the parliamentary secretary to the Ag Minister, and they were here with TELUS, took kind of a tour. So I think they're probably more receptive than people give them credit for, regardless of, I'm not all that political and whatnot. I don't really subscribe to that anybody's all that much better than the rest. I'm disappointed by all of them equally, I guess, but I think that keeping the conversation going is probably more important than anything.
Hey, great stuff. Hey, Patrick, thanks so much for joining us here. All the best to you as we head into the end of summer and into fall.
Right on. Good luck to you too.
We will keep on trucking with Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. When we come back, you're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And we take the Farmer Rapid Fire that is brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada to Three Forks, Montana, and we're talking to Franck Groeneweg. Hey, Franck, how's it going?
Doing fine. Good to hear from you, Shaun.
Yeah. So, hey, how's the year going for you down there in Montana?
Oh, it's been another interesting one. We started with a lot of winter kill in our winter wheat, and it looked kind of ugly. Our spring seeding went pretty well, a little bit later than normal. Then we had good rains, and about 6 weeks ago on, once the crops started to look really good. And still the winter wheat was really patchy, but it filled in and did pretty well. And last couple 3 weeks here, it turned hot, and we haven't had really a rain, and I think now we're going backwards. So I guess a little bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, and if my memory serves me right, even though we're kind of moving backwards, much better shape than the past couple years, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think we don't quite know what a good-looking crop is anymore. So, I mean, at this point, feel like we've been hit a few times by drought here, and it's starting to look maybe a little bit the same. So maybe I'm just hopefully I'm being pessimistic, and we'll get good surprises.
There's been a lot of focus from a lot of growers, Frank, people being, even with the market shooting around and being quite volatile, and this week has been no stranger to that with what's happened in the Black Sea region. A lot of farmers have not booked a lot of crop because of not exactly sure what they have out in the field. What have you been doing with crop marketing?
The last 3 years were pretty painful as far as forward contracting, and so we pulled back a bit. I do have some contracted for harvest time, for just cash flow and just move some stuff that you don't have to move twice. But we're pretty shy on moving crops. In other words, we have other crops that are a specialty, like mustard and so on, that are on Act of God contracts. Our chickpeas are contracted, mustard, and then we tried a bunch of other smaller crops like buckwheat, safflower, got a little bit of yellow peas, which we wouldn't call that a specialty crop, but a bit of camelina, a bit of flax. So we're trying different things to see if we can go continue cropping, and a bunch of these, some of the advantage is it's an Act of God contract with decent values at the front end. So we'll see how that turns out.
No lentils, it sounds like it.
No, it's been a little more difficult, lentils and wheat control, but I don't know. I don't know why I've really resisted it so much. You should give that a try. But there's one thing different here about lentils, like on the royalty side of it, red lentils that you can spray, the Clearfield lentils have a really hefty royalty on the seeds at the front end. So that makes it not really appealing from that standpoint. Okay. And you can't save the seed. Yeah.
Oh, you can't save the seed. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I know, you used to be a seed grower, so you don't have much sympathy for me on that side. But
Frank. You're always dragging me into trouble. You're always dragging me into trouble. How do the chickpeas look? Because they like adversity, especially early in the season. But how do the chickpeas look?
They look. We've just got different conditions as far as stubbles, and we've got some that looked awesome. Even a couple weeks ago, they look beautiful, and they were on some wheat stubble, long-term farming stuff, and looked beautiful. We had some on CRP, and they look tough, and now they look better. Now the ones that were on wheat stubble, they've actually started to turn backwards, I think. And then another section that they look okay. The ones that look not as good at the front end now seem to, I wouldn't say they look better than the other ones, but they look better than they have been. So I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. But they're starting to also feel like for the heat, they're starting to think, hey, maybe we should just call it an end here.
Do you have a lot of grain marketing options around you? Or what does the infrastructure look like there? Or is it, you got to go quite a ways to get to the next buyer?
So we're in a bit of so Montana has the High Line and the Golden Triangle around Great Falls, Havre, Shelby. It's a little bit of that Golden Triangle where they have a lot of options. And over here, we're south a couple hours of that. We're a little more in a valley, and we've maybe a little bit less options for grain marketing. We've got one main grain company. Otherwise, we have to go to Billings or Great Falls, which is a couple hours away. And that's where some of these specialty crops are somewhat appealing because often they're picked up on farm as well. But we will also have good relationship with our and it's grain company. It's Cooler actually in Butte, and they have a closer location they just bought here in Logan, Montana. Yeah. And so we have a bit of an option, but we're a little bit landlocked that way. Hasn't been too much. Actually, the basis has been fairly friendly in the last few years compared to the high line side. As much as we don't have a lot of choice, it hasn't been too bad either, because I think they're a little closer to some of the markets like California and so on.
Yeah. I was down, Highway 87 south of Havre to Fort Benton to Great Falls there. That was now back 3 weeks ago. Crops look pretty good. Or maybe 4 weeks, maybe a month ago now. But
up there.
Yeah.
But amazingly, it was dry at the front end, and then it turned wetter. I still have a friend that sunburst that he only got 2.5 inches since January. And that's 2.5 inches. And he's cutting some peas right now, and they are horrible, but not quite. They're about 15 bushel an acre, which he doesn't understand where they're from. So it's all over the place.
You drop off a load of wheat in Great Falls and have a beer at the Sip and Dip, and sounds like a pretty good life to me, Frank. You things are going good there.
Yeah, but I haven't been yet. I hear a lot of things.
Legendary pub. Okay. Hey, Frank, this week we're asking all the farmers, and I can ask you this, even though you're farming in Montana, because you did farm in Canada at one point. You're familiar with some of the players. We saw a cabinet shuffle in Canada this week, and hey, to everyone's surprise, Lawrence Macaulay is back as the Minister of Agriculture. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, good thing I'm not in ag leadership in Western Canada, because maybe I can be a little more open. But really, they had to recycle. So, that's liberal for you. They can recycle really well, right? I mean, they're against plastic straws, and they can find an old bugger because there was nobody else. So, I don't know. Maybe you're going to have to cut that piece. I'm not sure. That's my take on it.
I appreciate your take, Frank. Thanks so much. Hey, Frank, thanks so much for joining us here for the Farmer Rapid Fire. All the best to you. And hopefully you are being a little bit too pessimistic and those yields a little bit better than what you see out there. Thanks a lot, bud.
Well, thanks, John.
And we finish off this week's Farmer Rapid Fire like we always do, talking to our sponsor, Pioneer Seeds Canada. Right now we're talking to Ashley Knapton. She is Dairy Strategic Accounts Manager based out of the Ottawa Valley. Ashley, great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Shaun, good to hear from you.
Okay, how do the crops look there in the Ottawa Valley as we're fighting through some real storm activity as of late?
Yeah, you nailed it, bud. There's been lots of rain. That's probably been the biggest challenge, except, for the folks who honestly haven't had quite enough rain. There's kind of been both situations. And so where there's been cases of too much rain, and that means we're really seeing some of those crops start to suffer. But overall, I think most folks are going to be pretty happy.
Okay, so we're at that time of the year where if you got silage corn out in the field, you can see the end of the runway, so to speak. We're getting a little bit close. As we get tasseling, we got to start thinking about harvest.
You got it. Yeah. So now in my neck of the woods, actually, I'd say across the province, we're seeing stuff just starting to tassel, or maybe it's been tasseled for about a week. When we see that tassel emerge, that's 45-day warning. That means we are 45 to 50 days to harvest timing, and so we got to get ready to go. It's go time, which is really exciting, right? So when we see that tassel, there's a few things we can think about for harvest this fall. The first is kernel processing. So often I encourage folks, if you're able to get out and about, go check your kernel processing from last year. How close were you? Did you really nail it? Did you get, less than 4 whole or half kernels? If you nailed it, that's great. Do it again this year. Don't miss that mark. We've spent all summer growing these corn silage crops. We really want to make sure we can capture everything we can out of it. The other thing to think about now is, how much rain have we had from the moment we planted to tassel timing? Because that influences our digestibility in both BMR and non-BMR crops. So then we can start to think about what considerations need to be made. If I had a lot of rain, which guess what I did, I know that my digestibility is just not going to be as high as last year where I didn't have as much rain. So that's important to make some, end of the season game-changing decisions here, but then also just knowing how to balance it in my rations.
Yeah. Just step back a second. Let's talk about that kernel processing and the impact of not hitting the numbers that we want to hit. Okay, so what? What does it mean?
Yeah, great question. I mean, corn is still pretty pricey right now, right? So every time that we put a full kernel into that cow and it comes out the other end, that means we didn't capture any energy out of it. And so we both have to supplement that energy elsewhere. So probably bring in some other energy, or maybe it's energy that we've grown ourselves and we can turn around and sell it for a really nice price on the corn market. The other reality is that's just really expensive fertilizer, right? Like I said, we spent all season growing this. We really want to capture everything we can out of it. So breaking that kernel down, ideally, I'd love to see no kernels at all. That means that cow's rumen is going to have every chance that she needs to pick out all of those starch molecules and really capture all of that energy to make us a lot of milk.
Are there any differences in considerations or thoughts when we're putting up silage for a dairy animal versus a beef animal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm going to be really careful because I spend most of my time in dairy. So that's where my expertise is. But a lot of times, you know what's going to make a dairy cow give more milk is probably going to let a beef cow have more gains. And so my first recommendation all the time is talk to your nutritionist. Your nutritionist knows what's going on day to day. I know what's going on in the corn plant, but they're going to be able to really describe to you, this is what's happening in your herd, whatever kind of herd it might be. And they'll be able to kind of guide you on, what some of those management considerations are for fiber digestibility or overall starch capture, that kind of thing. But realistically, a cow's a cow, a rumen's a rumen. We want really high quality feed for all kinds of cows because that's just going to help our bottom line across the board.
It's no different than a human, right? It's when we think about, nutrition from a performance standpoint, there's what you intake is going to have an impact on your productivity, your energy, all of those things. An animal is no different.
That's it. You got it. And I mean, it all comes down to that bottom line too, right? I mean, it's maybe a little bit easier for dairy producers to track what their impacts on their bottom line is because, every pickup we get to see how much milk did those cows make, how much fat did they make, the things that we're paid on we get to see. We maybe don't get to see those dips in productivity on the cow side, depending on how big our herd is or what our level of management is. But realistically, having good feed is going to improve our return over feed, no matter what kind of animal we're working with. I'm a big believer that influencing our forage quality on farm is one of the absolute biggest things we can do for our productivity and our revenue at the end of the day.
Now, you mentioned that 45 to 50 days or at tasseling. Now, as we get closer, like in that 35 to 45 day range, are there things that we can do to check that corn plant that'll help us in terms of, okay, now it's go time?
For sure. Great question. One of the first things that we used to do was overall plant moisture. So we would chop a plant, we'd put it in a chipper and we'd say, okay, this is the moisture, it's sitting at 65%. That's great. That means that we're in that right range to ferment. That's awesome. Realistically, what we've learned is that probably the most ideal method is looking at that kernel milk line. Because if we think about it, that kernel or that cob, is about 50% of our overall yield, which means it's really what's influencing the dry down in that plant. As that plant progresses from milk to starch, that's what's driving the dry down. So we can look at our kernel milk line. You snap that cob in half, you look at the kernels at the tip end, and we're going to be able to see that as it gets closer, half is kind of the earliest we should go. 3/4 is really ideal. There should still be enough moisture in healthy plants. That's a really important part. So track your overall late season plant health. But in healthy plants, at 3/4 milk line, there should be enough moisture that we can get it fermented. It does depend a little bit on your storage, but we've seen a lot of folks do a really good job going only on kernel milk line.
Ashley, thanks so much for joining us here today on the Farmer Rapid Fire. All the best to you, and we'll chat with you a bit later on in the year.
You bet. Thanks, Shaun. Take care.
If you want to let us know how you're making out in your fields or in your barns, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Big thanks to Pioneer Seeds Canada for being the sponsor of the Farmer Rapid Fire. Make sure you go to pioneer.com/Canada to find out more. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.